We had a prayer meeting at our church last night, and one of our members opened up our time with a question. How many of us are dealing with real discouragement right now? And immediately, without hesitation, 4 out of 6 of us raised our hands. And that led to a sweet, heartfelt time of prayer. I, for one, really needed it. I imagine if I were able to ask that same question to all of you who are listening to this video, I'd get a similar response. We live through ups and downs in life, but we often dip into real discouragement. And I get the sense that a lot of us are discouraged right now. Discouraged with our world, discouraged with our churches, discouraged with our families. And if we're really honest, discouraged with ourselves too. How do you deal with discouragement? Does the Bible give us a way of grace through discouragement? Just by phrasing my question that way, I think you can guess the answer. Well, this week I stumbled upon an interesting chapter in one of the Old Testament prophet books, the book of Micah, chapter 7. And in verse 1, it begins this way. Woe is me, for I have become as when the summer fruit has been gathered. As when the grapes have been gleaned, there is no cluster to eat, no first ripe fig that my soul desires. What a vivid picture of a discouraged heart. The fruit's all gone. There's nothing left. I'm so empty and dried up on the inside that I don't even have the desire for the fruit I used to enjoy. Life is giving me nothing, and I've lost the will to even try to find joy anymore. When we get truly discouraged, we lose the energy to hope, and prayer becomes difficult to say the least. Well, then down in verses 8 and 9, he goes on. He says, Rejoice not over me, O my enemy. When I fall, I shall rise. When I sit in darkness. Let's stop there for a moment. What's happening here? Why would an enemy have an occasion to rejoice over me? Well, it's because I've fallen. And usually when the Bible talks about a person or a nation falling, it's because of their own failure or sin against God. When we fail morally, when we blow it and we feel the weight of God's displeasure with us, what do we tend to do? We sit in darkness. In Genesis chapter 3, we just saw last Sunday, what was Adam and Eve's instinctive response to their first sin? They ran away from God and they hid themselves from each other. They let their shame cover them like a cloud, and they wallowed in self-guilt. We tend to say, don't judge or gloat over me, other person, because I'm already judging myself hard enough. The big mistake that we often make is we just stay there. We sit in our darkness. We linger on the bad thoughts about ourselves, and we assume that other people are thinking the same bad thoughts about us too, sitting in our darkness. So now let me read those verses again and keep going. Rejoice not over me, O my enemy. When I fall, I shall rise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord will be a light to me. I will bear the indignation of the Lord because I have sinned against him, until he pleads my cause and executes judgment for me. He will bring me out to the light. I shall look upon his vindication. This is the path of grace. Instead of sitting in your darkness, what should you do? Let God be your light. First of all, it starts with owning your own failures. It says, I will bear the indignation of the Lord because I have sinned against him. Admit your faults and accept the fact that your sin deserves God's indignation. That's an ugly word, isn't it? Indignation is a strong form of anger and disgust. And I find it interesting that the author, instead of running away from God's disgust, the author runs towards God's anger toward him. And that's where he finds, he will bring me out to the light. I shall look upon his vindication. Literally, I will see his righteousness. On this side of the cross, we understand how God accomplishes this for us. We bring our sins and failures to the cross. Jesus takes them on himself. He pays for our guilt and he bears our shame. And he gives us in return his righteousness that we don't even deserve. It does you no good to keep sitting in your darkness. Make your way to the light of Jesus' grace. And then something interesting happens in the next verse, verse 10. Then my enemy will see, and shame will cover her who said to me, where is your God? My eyes will look upon her. Now she will be trampled down like the mire of the streets. Remember, we not only tend to hide ourselves from God, but we also tend to hide ourselves from others. If there is a person who would truly judge you for your failures, when you are standing in the light of God's grace and mercy, that person's judgmental spirit will boomerang right back on them. But your brothers and sisters who are standing in the same light of grace and mercy that you are standing in, they will rejoice with you. At the end of the chapter, it turns to an act of worship. In verses 18 and 19, it says, who is a God like you, pardoning iniquity and passing over transgression for the remnant of his inheritance? He does not retain his anger forever because he delights in steadfast love. He will again have compassion on us. He will tread our iniquities underfoot. You will cast out all our sins into the depths of the sea. When you are discouraged, this is your lifeline. It's God's character of forgiveness and love and compassion. Whatever you are going through that is causing you to feel discouraged, whether it's circumstances that are happening to you or you've brought on trouble yourself because of your failures, go to Micah chapter 7, read it, pray through it, and stop sitting in your darkness. Don't hide yourself from God or from people who love you. Move toward God and his grace. Move toward God's people. I won't pretend that all the bad feelings will just go away. The circumstances might not get any better anytime soon, but God is faithful. Only Jesus is able to change your darkness into his light. Keep moving toward the light of grace.